Hey, good morning. Good to see you all again. We're here for the second episode of, still not quite sure what we're calling this, but we're going to have a live discussion with myself. I'm Pastor Nathan Johnson of Redeemer Church. This is Pastor Greg Gaumer. He is our lead pastor. And we have with us Doug Shivers, the senior pastor of Boulevard Baptist Church. It's good to see all of you. Hope you are doing well enduring all the kind of craziness of this season. We're going to have a fun discussion today. We're going to discuss kind of how we're all doing. We're going to talk through maybe some eschatology, some end times things. We're going to talk about mentors. We're going to talk about spiritual gifts. A lot of fun things coming up for us today. So I hope you're excited. We're going to dive right on in. So guys, welcome. Thanks for being here again. How are we all handling this? Let's do that. Kind of just get straight into this this discussion. How are we all handling this? How are we doing leadership-wise and things like that? So let's kind of update how we're doing from last week.
Well, I think I'm doing a whole lot better than I was a week ago. I think everybody's starting to kind of get settled in. I think something that I've been learning about more, or at least having conversation with people about, is something they call decision fatigue. And I heard one pastor friend put it this way, we're all used to making decisions where we have tangible outcomes. We understand what's going to happen as a result. And now we're all having to make many decisions, but we're not exactly sure what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
And so just being aware of that and what that's doing, just knowing that information has allowed me to be okay with, just resting a little bit more, relaxing, and not getting so uptight or worried.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. I go from most of the time feeling pretty good to occasionally feeling absolutely overwhelmed with sense of anxiety and sadness. I'm thinking, okay, we're not quite a week into the stay-at-home order. So a little over 3 more weeks of this, and that seems like it's been a long time already. So that part of it, the decision fatigue, it's like every decision, not only do you not see the outcome, it feels like many of the decisions are weighted with issues of life and death. And in some sense they are. If you gather wrongly, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, somebody could get sick, somebody could die. So there's a lot of pressure on the decisions as well.
Like even setting this up.
Exactly.
We were talking last night, how can we make sure we are at least 6 feet apart?
Right.
So we came up with this trifecta thing here. So we're 6 feet at every angle, and then even everyone else is spaced out 6 to 8 feet. But just even silly decisions like that means we had to rearrange everything in this room,
Right.
and just to make sure that we're.
I think the
safe.
guys in hazmat suits is a little over the top myself, but that's okay if that's what they feel they've got to do.
That's right. Well, can't be too careful, I guess. Apparently. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the decision fatigue is something that I've never really, we talked about it a little bit last week. I've never really dealt with that, never really faced that before. And then I think just the latent stress. I was talking, we had a community group Zoom call last night, and we talked through a few things, but I talked with them, like, just that latent stress has come out in me, and just I'm shorter with my family. I'm not at all proud of that, but it's just been, it's hard to deal with that latent stress. It's one thing to have like a stressful week or project or something that you're kind of ramping up to do. It's a whole different thing to have a latent stress that's continuing on for the foreseeable future, for the next month or so. So it leads definitely to exhaustion. I've been that weird kind of tired, right? So what do we do with this? What solutions have you guys figured out? What would you encourage our people to do? How do we deal with that outlet for tension? To other ways that you found to rest? What do you guys think? What are some solutions to that?
I think that's probably fairly individualized.
Hold on, real quick.
Have we got an issue?
Speaking of decision fatigue, we're having to figure out who's not working. Nathan's not working very well. See, more decisions. More decisions.
So, all right. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody watch this.
Please stand by.
I'm uncomfortable right now.
Oh glad we're taking this seriously.
Oh, gosh.
Check 1 2. Is that better?
Getting reorganized.
All right. Talk
How's that?
again.
We good? Check 1 2. Yeah. Huh, I don't know what was going on. I'll just leave that right there then. All right. So, yeah.
Anyway, I think it's individualized. I've noticed I don't sleep well, but that's partly a function of age. I wasn't sleeping great before all this happened, so it affects my sleep. And I notice if I don't get enough rest, that starts impacting. I think the other thing is I have to, when I'm feeling that overwhelmed, remind myself of who's in charge, that this does have an end in sight. And it also helps me to realize that what we're dealing with in this is really kind of what history has always dealt with. We are so accustomed to having things that you go to the doctor, or not even have to go to the doctor, you call somebody. They call in a prescription, you get a medication, a few days, you feel better. Most of history has not worked that way. And so it's just reminded me that what we're dealing with is something that third world still deals with, and that historically all of civilization has dealt with.
Yeah. For us, kind of an outlet is, I mean, the weather's been really nice where we're at, so we've been outside.
Yes.
We spend almost all day outside riding bikes, playing basketball. Yesterday, and I would say that that's a really good outlet. I mean, I know we're all quarantined, but that doesn't mean we can't actually get outside. As long as we're being safe and kind of removed from one another. We went and played disc golf yesterday.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're all spaced out but having a great time and just enjoying the weather. So that's been good. And I would say during this time too, just speaking as a parent, this is a good time for us to make sure we're paying attention to our children. Mm-hmm. You know, we've been so locked into work and locked into sports schedules and locked into all these things. Now, essentially, those have been ripped from us in a lot of ways.
Right.
And some of us still have to work full time from home, but some of us have a little bit of freedom. So maybe instead of getting locked into social media and playing into the meme game or whatever, actually pay attention to your kids during this time and use it as an opportunity to connect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think getting outside, I went and played golf last week since the golf courses are open, and they're doing a lot to keep you at a distance. You end up in your own cart, you don't ride with anybody, but just getting out is huge. And I would take that as well. Turn off the news. I said that last time, I'm going to say it again. The news makes its money, if you will, by covering disaster. And if you listen all day long, I could see you ending up in a very dangerous place emotionally. So I would agree. Get outside, turn that thing off, read a book, do anything other than just take in nonstop coverage of this.
Yeah, that's good wisdom. That's good wisdom. So one quick question. What do we use in lieu of toilet paper, though? That's the real question. I think that's something that's on everybody's mind. Now that we have this shortage, and hasn't let up. What are our options?
As soon as this thing hit, the first thing that came to my mind was Demolition Man, the 3 seashells.
Yeah. That's valid. It's a little difficult to do in Middle America, but it can be done.
Well, I'm old enough to remember outhouses, but of course you had to have a Sears catalog, and that's a moot point now. So I'll just say that Americans seem to be limited in our thinking.
couple minutes on that.
Go ahead, brother.
You should go first.
I'll go first. There are a couple of guys that have helped me from the get-go. When I first was converted and believed I was called to preach, the first Baptist church I joined as a senior in high school, Bill Dudley was the pastor of that church, and Bill had a profound influence on me, both in terms of work ethic and the importance of study. There were a few of us in that church, and we were always looking for an opportunity to preach, and churches knew to call if they needed somebody to fill in. And if we weren't studying, if he didn't think we were doing the work, and they'd call and ask, they'd say, is Doug Shivers available? He'd say he is, but I wouldn't recommend him right now. He's being lazy. So that put in mind that, yes, you need to do the work. Larry Chapman, that pastored at Duncan Road in Blue Springs for years, and before that, First Southern in Stockton, poured a lot of life into me. And I would call those guys and ask for their wisdom. Now, if you're talking about dead guys that stand on their shoulders, the list is large, but among them, Spurgeon. I've never made that any secret. I'm a Spurgeon fanboy. His stuff has always been good for my soul. D. Martin Lloyd-Jones, huge influence in my life. Among the Puritans, there are many, but Thomas Brooks has probably done as much good to my soul as anyone. So that's a handful, a selection. And I'd take a step further. You guys are meeting with our jokingly called T417G group. Young pastors have always been good for my heart and soul, and I've appreciated that. So.
I don't even want to answer. Like, how can my answer be so amazing? But I think for me, the mentor in my life, there's been several people, but I think even just you, Doug, have been a big one. So for many of you, you don't know our history. So Doug's son and I, Jeremy, have grown up together since junior high. And so Doug has seen me as a rebellious, non-believing football player. So Doug has also been to me the dad of my close friend. So I've had that kind of relationship. And then when I came to faith, you've been the person who's helped mentor me, helped pastor me. You baptized my wife, you counseled us, you married us, you buried our daughter. You've just been there. And then the last handful of years, we've been a part of a cohort. And so you've been a father in the faith to me. You've helped me focus my thinking, become a pastor, and really just learn how to love people as a pastor. So I think very much you've been that in my life. But I would also agree with you. There's been several people in the world of church planting, Lane Harrison at Life Point, Rick White down at City View. All those guys have been guys that I could reach out to along the way. And so I have probably more alive mentors than I do dead ones at this point, but that's mine.
Yeah, I would echo that completely. I think Rick and Lane have been tremendous. Doug, you've been an unbelievable blessing to us as pastors, as men, as husbands, fathers. It's been just a joy to glean your wisdom, along with just the other guys in that cohort. They're great dudes. One of the guys that I have known for a long time, my very first pastor growing up, was a guy named Jack Riddle Hoover, and he's in his late 80s now. And love Dr. Jack, and he's been a tremendous encouragement to me through the years. He does that for a living now. He has a thing called Ministers Mentoring Services in Abilene, Texas, my hometown, and he mentors pastors, leads Bible studies with them, counsels them through all the different changes in their churches and the challenges. Wow. He's done that for more than 20 years now, I think. Yeah. So he's been a joy to know. I've never come away from a conversation with him challenged, encouraged, and motivated. Every single time I talk with him, it's been that way. And I still save some of his handwritten notes that he sent me over the years, just little notes. So I owe to him. I have to give him credit for people who like how organized I am and the way that I file things in my computer and how structured I am. I owe that to Jack. And the handwriting notes, I owe that to two people. Jack is one of them, and then there's this a lady who's she's since been to be with the Lord, but her name is Eileen Culpepper. She wrote the most encouraging notes to everybody in our church. She was a true saint and a beautiful woman in that.
That's
So, so lots of great people to talk through, and I have a feeling that we're probably going to be revisiting this and talking about mentors and books and things like that in the future episodes. Let's talk through pastors. Let's go from more personal thoughts to more pastoral thoughts. Let's talk through what are we seeing in the community. How is Springfield, as we're driving around town, how is Springfield responding? What is the general tone, not necessarily of our churches, but of the community itself? What are we seeing pastorally, and what's going on there?
Yeah, I was thinking on this about in the last week. So we live up here in the northwest side of town, and up here in the northwest, if you know Springfield at all, it's kind of broken up into two communities. You have your front porch community and your back porch community, and that's kind of like North Springfield, South Springfield, and that's just because of the architecture. And so we live up in North Springfield in a front porch community, and so there's a lot more traffic where we're at. We're also in a very poor community. The homeless community is up here as well. And so we've just noticed springtime is always the time where everybody gets out anyways, but it's even more now. Especially the homeless community is not able to really be at the kind of gas stations, libraries, some of these other places that generally the population would hang out. Now they're just kind of moving throughout the city and hanging out wherever they can, and so I've noticed that quite a bit, and it's just caused me to think, okay, what do we do with this segment of the population that can't quarantine, that doesn't necessarily have access to always clean food or water, or being able to just get wash clothes, and even internet access. A lot of our communication is coming online, and a lot of these folks are just not kept up with everything. And so how are we seeing these people? That's been a lot of my question. And I've heard some people kind of see this community as really the carriers, if you will, and almost kind of like, hey, let's stay away. But another thought, just from a Christian perspective, is, okay, well, how do we serve and help these people, but do it wisely?
And I don't think that's an easy question to answer at this point, Greg.
Right.
We're in a situation where there is a sizable homeless population in Springfield. And besides that, you have just the poor. And I think one of the challenges for churches, and I would say pastors and ministries, is how many times have we had folks come to us for help who unfortunately are there basically to scam us? I know when I was younger in ministry, I tried to have a much more generous outlook on that. But over and over again, so many times to be lied to over the years, if you're not careful, it just makes you jaded. And you don't want to get to the point that you don't care. I honestly think this is one's above my pay grade. I don't have any good answers for this at the moment. I'm hoping that people who know more about this, maybe Victory Mission, maybe Grand Oak, may have some better answers for us down the road. I would appreciate hearing some of that. Part of the thing we're facing is if we're going to do the shelter in place, we've suspended any office hours at Boulevard. So if folks come looking for help, likely they're not going to find somebody there. I think we've got some work to do down the road. But I would agree. I would love to see something coordinated in some way through some of the agencies already in place that maybe churches could assist with in terms of finances and resources and volunteers. But I almost feel like there needs to be people who have done this and know more about that leading the way.
Yeah, and I'll say as well, I mean, we've been praying about it, been asking certain folks in our church to kind of pray and think through and kind of discover what are some possible options. And another avenue of ministry that we've been thinking about, and one of our leaders in the church has mentioned this. So with everybody on quarantine, Well, with one of the issues in our city being domestic abuse and violence,
Right.
now we have victims locked down with
Yes.
their abusers.
Yes.
So how do we handle that? And so just for anybody who's tuning in, we are trying to figure out answers to that, on how to do that. If you're somebody who knows, hey, here's a good 2 or 3 steps that a church can do. If somebody who is in an abuse situation and is scared and they want to reach out to somebody and they want to reach out to a church, here are the first 2 or 3 things a church can do. Please email us, message us.
Yep.
Love to be a help.
Yeah. I know that I saw a piece on one of the news stations that Harmony House was still open, still taking people. In fact, they had things set up, I believe, for an isolation area to begin with before they would let them into the population. So I think that's still going on. But yeah, it would help to have some more information.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things I've heard just in discussion is just, I know Harmony House is open, but that sometimes those who are abused just have a fear of even saying anything.
Right.
And maybe as a church, we could at least be an ear
Yes.
for folks, Lord willing. It's one of those things that's over my pay grade as well.
Right.
If it's over y'all's pay grades, it's definitely over mine. So, but I think those are good answers. I think those are good. That's good good stuff. So yeah, if you know anybody, or if you are connected with any organizations that can help educate us and help us make more educated decisions, drop us something in the comments. Email us. You can email info@redeemersgf.com. Or Boulevard. I don't know what y'all's.
Ours is office@boulevardbaptistchurch.net.
There we go. So yeah, just drop us a line. We'd be happy to hear from you. And we want to grow in this area. This is something that we haven't encountered before, but we're trying to lean into with the best. And we also don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to make wrong decisions.
Right.
So
we don't want to make it worse.
right, exactly. So that was good. So let's kind of talk about our churches a little bit, and I may flip this on you guys too. What is one unique thing about your church? Let's do it like this. Greg, why don't you say one thing that's unique about Boulevard, and then Doug, why don't you say one thing that's unique about Redeemer, and then we'll brag on our own churches, right? So let's steel man each other, and then let's talk about it. So so Greg, what's one thing that's unique about Boulevard? I know I'm throwing you right at it, but what's one thing that's unique about Boulevard that they do really well, that is a credit to the kingdom that they bring uniquely?
I think what makes Boulevard stand out is just how theologically grounded you guys are. Not that we're not a theologically grounded church.
It was unhinged.
Yeah, just winging it. But I think you guys have always been a theologically mature and healthy church, and even as we have started Redeemer, I mean, you were one of the guys I went to. How does our theology look? I remember your question goes, "Hey, did you write this yourself?"
I remember that conversation.
Oh yeah. I was like, "What makes you think that?" But that's always been something that we've gone to look at Boulevard for us. Okay, what do we read? How do we need to think about this? How do we need to articulate this? You guys have been in this for so long. You've been able to kind of really, maybe polish is too strong of a word, but kind of polish your theology and how you work that out.
Yep.
To me, the most impressive thing about Redeemer is definitely the outreach you have in this community. You do the mission side of this so well, and that has always impressed me. I think, and not just in terms of going out, you do that, but also bringing people in, the way you've created a means to attach people to your congregation, even as folks with serious issues, serious problems. I think you all have done some modeling there that is very impressive.
Thank you.
Well taken. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you all. You're very kind.
So
theologically polished.
So Doug, what if you were going to brag on Boulevard? Then what is something that you guys think that you
Well,
do?
let me tell you one thing they're not very good at is their Boulevard swag.
Yeah, we upgraded the swag this week.
We found this at an antique shop.
It's lovely. Antique. It's 9 years old. 1911 to 2011. We were founded in 1911 as the result of a tent revival over at the corner of Commercial and National along there.
Yeah.
And we originally founded as Seventh Baptist Church.
Seventh Baptist Church.
Seventh Baptist Church of Springfield. And then eventually when they incorporated, we became National Boulevard Baptist Church. So this was from our centennial. You're right, I had to go dig and find a box and had these in though. So yes, you're picking on our swag, but at least we've got something.
You got something, and it's cool. We can't say that we're 100 years old. So
No, we can't.
And that was
No.
9 years ago. They turned 100 before we even planted.
Okay, what do we do well? I think I'd piggyback off of the theology. We have some very, I believe, gifted teachers just across the board. Mm-hmm. And whether you talk about our elders or talk about our Sunday school teachers, our leadership, I've just noted that the Lord's been very kind to us to have some very gifted teachers, both men and women, working in all of our areas for discipleship. So whether it's in the Awana groups, in Sunday school, our adult discipleship, the Lord has been very kind to bring us good teachers.
That's cool. That's really cool.
The uniqueness for Redeemer, I was trying to think more specifically to this situation, but I think one of the things that makes us unique is that we're pretty adaptable, because I think that's the pro of being a church plant, maybe under 10-year-old church plant, is that we can pretty much adapt to any situation. I mean, this office has changed a dozen times in the last month, and though the type A's don't necessarily like it, we've had to learn to adapt and adjust and change, and so that's been a strength of ours. It's kind of been a hand that it's been forced upon us.
So we roll with the punches really well. We take direct punches quite well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've loved about Redeemer is our focus on discipleship, and I think we crafted our vision and the foundation of our church to focus on discipleship, like you were talking about. We do that with redemption groups and community groups in a bunch of other different ways. Mm-hmm. We try very hard to focus on that, make that a hallmark of what we do. And then one of the things one of the odd, unexpected feedback that we've gotten from people who've come in is that we sing really loudly, and that may have something to do with we are in we're in a cinder block and steel structure with a concrete floor. So that may have something to do with it.
Built-in amplification.
But it seems that it seems from other people that we sing really loudly, and I think there are times where it's very noticeable, like, oh wow, our people are really belting it out today, which is really cool. So, yeah.
Well, and I know I was only supposed to do one, but I'll say another. I think one of the things that I appreciate that we do is I think our gathered worship is very intentional and thoughtful. Mm-hmm. We say that we're there to sing the word, pray the word, preach the word, speak the word ourselves, and respond to that word. And so our services are very much saturated with that, no matter what it is we're doing.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think this is what's been good about our relationship, and even Seth, who's not here from the Way Church. Our churches, our leadership have been meeting together for some time, and though we are all different in unique ways, we're all willing to notice the uniqueness of the other church, right, and learn and grow and partner. Yes. And so that's been something I've loved seeing in the last 5+ years. Yes. Among all of us. What you do well, we're going, okay, maybe we can consider kind of shaping that up here, and I've even seen that in you guys as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's why Greg's got some gray hair now. He's like, oh, Doug's got gray hair. It's awesome. Gonna have to get some of that. Yeah. So,
well, as long as you get to keep your hair, brother, that's it. Gray's good if it just stays put.
That's right. That's right. So let's shift now. We kind of teased this episode with talking about spiritual gifts. I would love to hear you guys talk about your spiritual gifts, your own spiritual gifts, and then kind of bridge that into how can, like, in light of the current distress, how can people who are quarantined exercise their spiritual gifts? What does it look like for us to do this, to exercise spiritual gifts and manifest the Spirit in that sense in a divided corporate context? So what are your spiritual gifts, and how do you use them? And then we'll talk through some advice for people.
My kind of top two gifts are evangelism and kind of apostleship, apostolic gifting. And so as far as evangelism, I think the unique turn that has happened lately, granted we can't just kind of go out and greet everybody and talk to everybody. I think what it has presented to me is the opportunity to lead a lot of our people to be more evangelistic. So what I've noticed in our church body, we have a pretty diverse group of people, but we also happen to have a lot more introverted type people. Mm-hmm. And we all know that the introverts in real life are the extroverts online. And they're the most witty, they're the most outspoken.
That's right.
You know, I get on Facebook and I'm bored after 20 seconds and I usually turn it off. And so now I'm starting to kind of, hey, for those of you who have found evangelism to only be the door knocking and only be the Evangel Cube and only be these sorts of things, now this is it might be one of the only times in history where social media actually represents your real life status. Mm-hmm. And people might actually pay attention. And so instead of using it to be witty and to just be funny with memes all the time, why don't you use your influence to actually be creative and share the gospel? And so that's kind of where my direction is going right now, mm-hmm. to encourage people in that way. You know, as far as me personally, I still hang out on my front porch. I still talk to people who come down my street. I still have relationships with my neighbors who are not believers, and I'm always interacting in that way. As far as the apostolic side, that's more of the kind of starting new things, church planter in me. I still have this desire to think outside the box. Mm-hmm. How can we, even though we're quarantined here, how can we do something? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a lot more measured than it was 10 years ago, where I was mm-hmm. like, I'm going to just plow over everybody and make it happen. Now it's more of, okay, how can we think wisely in this and not allow this pandemic to just stop us from mm-hmm. the mission that God has called us to do? Yeah. And so still having conversations, still thinking, still passing ideas past our leadership to think through, can we do anything? Mm-hmm. If so, how can we make it happen? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those have been good conversations to be in on, I think. And that's, over the years, you've challenged me tremendously. Our gifts complement each other, very different, but they mm-hmm. complement each other very well. And that's something that you've certainly stretched my thinking in and made me get outside of my own way of thinking. It's been really cool to be part of that and see the staff respond and all that stuff. So, Doug, what about you?
Does sarcasm count?
It does. It is the highest. Yes. That was sarcastic.
Indeed. My gifting is teaching primarily. And along with that, I think shepherding, caring for a congregation. I think it's hard to do this effectively if you don't enjoy people, care about people, and be connected. And that has always been my gifting. Now, early in my Christian life, my assumption was that this was going to lead to the classroom. My intent had been to get my master's and PhD and eventually, in my humble opinion, be the Baptist R.C. Sproul. My ambition had a hard meet up with reality a couple of decades, 3 decades ago. So it never came out that way, but realized that there's a need for teaching, and my gifting was in a church context, not a classroom context. As far as that now, in this context, people have all sorts of theological questions. And I'm thankful to have done a lot of reading, a lot of digging on this. And I think one of the ways my teaching comes out, that gift, is helping folks process what's going on now, helping them think through it. Did you consider this text? Have you pondered this? a little nudge this way, a little direction that way. The same thing in shepherding, to show compassion while at the same time not being afraid to admonish if need be, but encourage.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, that's solid. That's solid. I think I've just through interactions with other pastors and over the years, I think I've seen that God has gifted me with the gift of knowledge and the gift of teaching. I love learning stuff, and it took me until I was in seminary probably to realize that I was unique in that I love that I have a just kind of voracious appetite for just learning stuff. And like I used to, when I was bivocational, I used to be bored at work from time to time, and I would just get on Wikipedia and click on a random article and just read. I found out all kinds of cool, interesting things. It was just a lot of fun but I found that same thing with Scripture, with reading. I love to read. I love to process and bring in a lot of information and then spit it back out in an intelligible, cogent, concise way. And that's been, I've realized that is something that the Spirit has equipped me to do. And so I try my best to do that for His glory, with counseling, with teaching, with preaching, things like that. And that's if you've heard me preach, that's why Greg and I are very different. You've heard the difference in our gifts. That's why our preaching styles are different. We come at the same task, but from different angles, and I think we complement each other well in that regard.
And I think this is there's a funny story of me in third grade. My parents were telling me, "Hey, you're going to be out of school today. We're going to go to a place, and they're just going to kind of talk to you about some things." I'm like, "Awesome! I get out of school." And little did I know I was getting tested for ADD, and I took the test, and I was like, "Okay, so what are the results?" "Well, you don't have ADD, but they did say you don't like school." Like, okay. So I think this is my whole life has never been I want to go read the next book, I want to go gain the next piece of information, but it's been more I want to get out, I want to go interact. And when the Lord saved me and the Lord brought me into ministry, I was for sure never going to be a senior pastor. I was like, I am not going to be that guy. I can't, but I also don't want to be that youth guy. I say that with air quotes. Youth people are cool, but that guy. And so, but then when he called me into church planning, it made sense, but I still knew my weaknesses as far as knowledge and teaching and those things. So I've made it a purpose of mine to gather people around myself who are strong in areas that I'm weak, and I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Well, it's similar for me, of course, with Boulevard, Matt Whitaker and Nathan Murphin on staff. Matt is excellent at seeing opportunities. How can we be evangelistic? What's the way for us to get involved with missions? The whole Senegal mission that he's worked with Seth on, and other outreaches. All of that, trying to bring people who complement you, I think is important.
You got some solid dudes over there. Those are great guys. So let's talk through how can we encourage people who are watching or who may come into contact with this. How can we encourage them to use their spiritual gifts during this season? So we're talking about, I'm kind of curious, what is the gift of hospitality, the gift of service, evangelism, healing, administration, mercy, discernment, exhortation, encouragement, faith, giving, all those different things. We're talking through all those different things.
How long are we doing this?
We're going to go the next 6 hours. But how can we, so those more kind of corporate gifts like specifically hospitality, service, mercy, how can that look when we're all supposed to be separate and we're all engaging online? What does that look like?
I think we're seeing it kind of fleshed out and figuring out as we go. I'd say one thing I would point out is it's easy to think about your spiritual gifts by extension, how do I minister outside of the context I'm in? Yep. How about making home hospitable for the people that have to be there? It's kind of like the old argument, you're nicer to your friends than you are to me. Your spouse says that to you. Or you're nicer to strangers. So maybe one element of this is to do better in our own households with how we relate to one another. Our children may not remember much about this depending on their age, in my case grandchildren, but they'll remember attitudes. They'll remember how mom and dad responded. Now, if you're thinking in terms of the kingdom, I think individuals have to work out those details. Hospitality may not be possible. And then again, it may be. Somebody may feel like they can bring somebody into their home, figure out a way to do that. I would say certainly needs to be caution, but you'd have to know your own conscience. I think you just see where the needs are, and within the limitations of what we can do, how do I get engaged here?
Yeah. The only thing I would say in addition to what I mentioned earlier is about online evangelism is when you're out and about, look up. Look up and notice people around you. And keep in mind, people are image bearers. So it doesn't matter if it's the homeless person or the well-off person. Everybody is an image bearer of God, and so we need to see them as that, not as potential threats to our health or whatever it is. And that helps us then just have a heart of compassion towards them.
Yes.
My wife was driving our kids around the other day, and we always see people out, and we know a ton of people out on the streets, and one of my kids rolled down the window and yelled out to the person by name, saying hello to them on the streets. And my wife turned to our kid and said, I love how you say hi to people, and you know their name. And our kid said, well, why wouldn't I? I mean, why wouldn't I see them as just a person? Because she was explaining to them, a lot of people don't see people as people. And just that's an act of hospitality.
It is.
Even though you can't bring them into your home, I acknowledge you exist.
And I would echo it's that in this way. I think in our case, we have several senior adults, part of our congregation, who are definitely trying to take care of themselves, and we want them to. But a card, a text, that's hospitality, a phone call. Another one I hadn't even thought about and just came to my attention, healthcare workers. There's actually been apparently some instances where healthcare workers have been threatened in public forums if they show up in their scrubs, like on their way to work. That just boggles my mind. They're on the cutting edge of this, and why would you treat them contemptibly? But that's actually happening, and there's a lot of stress with their jobs now. There's limits to what they can do. So I think about healthcare workers. I think about police officers, firefighters. There's just a whole list of people there that we ought to be doing what we could if they're in our congregation and we see them to say something encouraging, to let them know they're appreciated.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah, that's really good. So one of the questions we had submitted, this will hopefully be interesting. Is it okay for people to use their gift of prophecy to see if their coworker has COVID? Is that a valid use, or is that is that messing with the Spirit too much?
Well played. Remember, you're talking to a virtual cessationist here, so I'm sitting here just kind of chuckling at that prospect. Moving along.
Yeah, let's not get too sidetracked.
It seems like the person who submitted that question is just struggling inside, or maybe they're just been too confined for too long and they're just getting at their wits' end.
Could be. Delusions of grandeur could be involved here.
Right, that could very well be the case. So how are our churches tactically responding? So how are we adapting? Greg, you mentioned that we were pretty adaptable, and I would agree with that. But how are we adapting to this ministry season? What is it that we have changed? Obviously, we can't meet. So, what specifically have we changed with our ministries and getting the word out and still doing what we do as a church?
I'm not a tactician, but
No, I'm well aware.
I actually on that question, I was like, I think Nathan should answer this question. How about you answer that question?
I do have actually an answer. Okay. So then I was like, oh man.
Why don't you take the question?
It'd be like me asking you, what are you doing for evangelism?
So what we've done, we've decided to, like a lot of churches, we do the live broadcast for preaching and worship, which has been really a joy to see. Even though there's kind of a hollowness to it, I think that's kind of makes us hunger. And this was one of the things I was kind of thinking on the last question. in the absence of being able to practice these gifts like hospitality, service, and evangelism, I think one of the things that this time should make us do is hunger for when we can do them more freely. We can do what we can, like you mentioned, we just be creative and do what we can in this season, but it should make us hunger and make us more fervent when we can do them, and give us realize that we had a lot of excuses for not doing them before, and now that we don't have the opportunity, it should make us kind of more hungry for it. So the same thing with preaching and worship. I think preaching to a camera is one thing, and watching a sermon on Facebook or wherever we broadcast it to is one thing. But being live in an audience with 150, 170 other people, or even more, I'm not exactly sure how big your congregation is, but being live in an audience with that interactive aspect of preaching, that is a tremendously important thing, especially hearing people worship together. It's one thing for me to worship in my home with my family. It's a whole different thing to be there with a crowd. Yes. And that's one of the things that, like, for example, T4G, they canceled T4G. One of the most moving things that we have in that whole conference is amazing preaching and great books and all kinds of great stuff, but the worship there with 10,000 people is just resounding and amazing. And that's something that we hunger for when we're not there. And so I'm hoping that same idea will translate for us. We've also done Bible studies. Our Bible study leaders, we've got a men's Bible study tonight, I think, and then we've had women's Bible studies going throughout the week. We've done our online giving. That's been, we kind of continued. People are mailing in checks and things like that. We haven't done any sacraments or ordinances, like taking communion. Baptism would be a little weird on Facebook. but I mean, it can be done. It's not saying it can't be done. It can be done, but we've just decided to forego those for the time being, and let that have us be more fervent when we return. And then we've kind of decentralized our benevolence. We've tried to decentralize the decision-making process and let it be more tactical for our community group leaders and for our ministry leaders to do what they need to do and not have to run everything up the chain of command to us, and to take the pressure off of us for making decisions, but also empower them to say, hey, like, you're the hands and feet, let's go do this. You go lead the charge and let us know how we can support or fund or whatever it is. So that's kind of how we've just been more conscientious with communication as well. We're not taking those interactions, those happenstance interactions for granted. We're kind of intentionally reaching out and saying, okay, I'm gonna make sure we reach out to this person today. So that's kind of how we've tactically adapted. What about you guys at Boulevard?
Some very similar things. We've got teachers who are trying to continue their classes. They're using Zoom or other things like that, and we're looking to see if we can make that even more effective, maybe find other ways to make that work better, both for our Awana and some of our adult classes. We've always had deacon family ministry, where each deacon is responsible for about 19, 21, something like that, families to check on regularly. But we narrowed the time frame and said, we want you to contact them within this 2 weeks and send it all to our office, email it in, so we can make sure that we're not missing anybody, and also to report to us if there's a need that we're not aware of. If somebody's hurting, if there's a financial crisis, to keep track. The elders have divided the congregation in the same way for us to try to contact within a certain period of time. We have certainly amped up those kinds of communications. And we're doing the same thing with the preaching and the music. I think we just have to realize we've got to make peace with the fact this is not the church gathered for worship. It's not even close. It's a tool, and it's a helpful tool. But I think there's limits to that. And I was involved in a bit of an online discussion on Facebook with a pastors group. There were guys who were going to have the Lord's Supper and do it virtually. I'm not comfortable with that. And when I saw some of the arguments, I realized I don't think guys have really thought through the issues of the Lord's table the way they need to. Now, certainly they're at liberty to do it. This is not a...
Well, I see this online too, just kind of this hashtag, the church is not the building. Some other memes of saying, the church is now deployed. I think we've had a wrong perspective of what the church is. Even our home churches, you're in a building, it's called your house. And so I think if the church building becomes the mission, then it's losing, it's struggling. I don't think we need to just go anarchy against church buildings here, if you will. But I think what we need to do is see church buildings as a facility and a place where the church gathers.
Yeah.
And if you've never been deploying before, then this virus isn't going to change anything.
Right. That's completely right.
Yes.
So we're always supposed to be on mission.
Yes.
So we should be hungering. And look, you're just because you're meeting in a church, in a home, if you don't have pastors over you, you're not upholding the sacrament. I mean, you are part of the church scattered, but you're not the church in terms of a local congregation and a local body. There's a real blessing in the way that the Lord has designed the church to be.
Yes.
Having the structure of overseers and deacons and the sacraments, that's a beautiful picture of the bride of Christ.
Yes.
And so we have to be careful that we're not rebelling against that.
Right.
And just waving the flag, hey, look, we can just do church in our home. This is enough. I would tend to disagree.
Yeah. Well, I profoundly disagree. This is not enough. It is what we must do at this time. And elements of that need to continue once this is done. If folks have not been thinking in terms of their task, their gifts, their neighbors' mission, that needs to go on.
Yeah.
If this rattles the church to get that in mind and heart, praise God.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that. But this antipathy toward facilities, I just scratch my head.
Yeah.
A building's a tool. That's what it amounts to.
Right.
And as long as it's a tool, what's wrong with having the facility?
Right.
These things are to be done in the context of a congregation and a gathered. I mean, Corinthians even says, when you gather, do these things. Now, I guess you could say, well, we're gathering online. And I would say, well, that's not gathering in the sense, I think, that Paul's speaking of here.
Yeah, even Paul had to rent a public facility, the
Precisely.
Hall of Tyrannus,
And, the evidence is the early church met it wherever they could that was big enough to hold them.
Yeah.
So, for our part, my hope is that once this is lifted and we can have our first congregational gathering again, I intend for us, Lord willing, to have the Lord's Supper, unless there's some health reason to hinder it. And I look forward to that. I look forward to, the opportunity for baptism again, all of those things. So you live with the tension. You live with the discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good answers, guys. Thank you all. So what are we, so tactically, we're talking through what are we changing on a week-to-week and a ministry level. What are we changing strategically? You guys have kind of already hit on this. Strategically, large, big picture, what are we seeing shifting in our churches? And I'll kind of throw out some of the thoughts that I've had. We've started investing more. We've already had solid, strong lay leadership, right? We're starting to invest more in them and decentralize that. And we've invested a lot more in technology, as you can see. We've got lights and cameras and microphones and things like that. But we've decided to bump up our presence on Facebook and bump up a few things so that we can be more effective in light of the present distress that we're in. So in the same way that we would use a building and upgrade a building, like let's say I was kind of thinking about this, what if we had the exact opposite problem? If all of our electronics shut down and all we had was a local gathering, like let's say 150 years ago, or maybe 1911, when there was no communication, no electricity,
Right.
that all we had was a central place to gather and worship. We would have to use that building as a facility tool, and we would want to upgrade that in the same way that we're seeing the exact opposite now. I hope this makes sense, that I'm not just rambling, but we're upgrading our technology and ability to meet decentralized. We would have to upgrade our ability to meet centralized because we didn't have any other options, any other ministry tools to make that happen. So we've been, at Redeemer, we've been investing in technology, investing in lay leadership, and decentralizing our decision structure, empowering our leaders so that we can be more adaptable in the given context in home group neighborhoods and things like that. We want to make sure that we're meeting the needs wherever they are. So we've tried to be more versatile in that sense.
Well, and I know for us that's certainly true. I've noticed over the years, the shift that took place is that most folks got acquainted with the Boulevard through our website. That's their beginning place. So it's an opportunity. If you hear the preaching and you go, I don't know that I want to listen to that every week. What's the point of showing up to visit? I get that. But I think that, honestly, I think things like Facebook, internet presence, however you do that, YouTube, website is becoming front door stuff for churches. Maybe the porch in some ways, to go back to thinking about a front porch. And I see we're probably going to be spending some more money on this, certainly more effort. I've got guys that are working now to educate themselves. What's the best way for us to do this? How can we do it most effectively? What's most cost effective? But using the internet as a tool, not to be a substitute for, not to create the so-called virtual church, which I find an absolute contradiction in terms.
I agree.
But how do we use that as a means of evangelism, communication, augmenting and implementing fellowship, some decentralization? I think we're going to look at some things down the road. How do we empower our people to do more on their own and free them to do that?
Yeah, it's good. I think those strategic shifts, I hope that some of them endure and that we can see, oh wow, we were doing ministry kind of one way before 2020, and then there was a shift in 2020. What happened there? We can kind of tell the story of, oh, this is how we had to make that decision, and the church was streamlined and better because of it. And then we can, move on from there and see what kind of mistakes we're starting to make right now, or we're baking into the mix right now. But cool. Do you have any thoughts on that, or you want to?
No.
Okay, cool. I didn't want to cut you out of the conversation. But yeah. So let's talk through what are we doing for Easter? Just a quick. Now, so Easter's coming up in this is next week, right?
A week from this Sunday.
A week from this Sunday, yeah. So, so what are we doing for Easter? How are we, what do we do when like the Super Bowl Sunday of Sundays, right? Is for us is not going to really happen in the same way.
Well, I got my pastel shirt, my brand new pastel shirt folded up in my drawer,
nice.
ready to put on.
Yes.
Gonna look bright on camera.
Right on camera. Are you gonna put your suit on like you always do?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
He always dresses up. He always dresses in like the sharp suit and stuff on Easter Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's one I bought like a decade and a half ago. It still works.
It still works.
Good.
We're going to still do our Good Friday service. We'll do it online, and of course Easter on Sunday. And I know, Easter isn't just confined to one day.
Right.
But I think, in my opinion, I think still pursuing it and celebrating it and even preaching up to it is good because I think I mentioned this last week. There's so much uncertainty. But there is certainty in the resurrection of Christ.
Yes.
Amen. Yep.
And if there's anything that the people need to hear, it's that Jesus lives and he is coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're still going to be moving forward as far as preaching in that way.
Yeah.
Timely word. Yeah.
We're going to do what we've been doing. We're planning to do a Good Friday service as well as Easter service. This year we are actually, in the past we've done 2 services to try to accommodate because we'd have a big enough attendance. It was going to be hard to get everybody in there. But with the remodel, we were going to try it this year to see if we could do it all in one service. Well, we're going to do it all in one service, but there's going to be 10 or less of us in the building. So, and I think part of the message in this that I think we would do well to convey, and this just occurred to me as you were talking about this, I think about the disciples on Easter. They see, but they don't understand what's going on. They see an empty tomb, but they don't get it. And what are they all doing? They're sheltering. They're hiding. They're afraid they're going to die. They may be the next ones crucified if the leaders get their way. And so they're all hiding, and Jesus comes in. No matter where they're hiding, he shows up. And they're all startled. Doors are locked, everything's closed. Here's Jesus. What happened here? And the first words out of his mouth, what's the first words from the angels? Don't be afraid. What's our default setting? Yeah. I'm afraid.
Right.
Yeah.
Jesus shows up. Don't be afraid, because our default setting is fear. And the fear is the same fear. We're afraid of sickness. We're afraid of death. We're afraid of outcomes here, an uncertain future. The resurrection is the declaration that because of what Christ has done, to quote Packer's Knowing God, the resurrection is the certainty that Jesus is loose and at large in the world. Is a great reminder that no matter what happens to us, death is not the end.
Right.
And our future is certain.
No.
Right. That's good.
No. Amen. So in light of that, talking about the future, let's talk about eschatology for a few minutes. Let's get into some theology. So the very first question was another one submitted. For those of us who haven't finished the Left Behind books, can you summarize them briefly and then let us know where we are in the tribulation?
I'd be glad to. Lovely books for fiction. Highly questionable as far as I'm concerned for eschatology. Yeah. If you're trying to, here's what I'll say. If you're trying to place what's going on today in some eschatological calendar, I'm about to help you. Okay? We are in the last days. For 2,000 years, we have been in the last days.
Yep.
Since the ascension of Christ, we have been in the last days. So there you go. There's your calendar.
Awesome. So is this then, is this the judgment of God? Is this the apocalypse, as it were?
I would say no. I wouldn't say that. I tend to, my eschatology probably more has been kind of discipled by Doug here. I'm a little bit more optimistic.
Right. You're both wrong, but it's fine. It's good.
Whatever. I would say I wouldn't hone this in and be so rigid and say this is what this is. I mean, as far as Scripture is concerned, I don't see this kind of lining up in that way. I would definitely see this as a way that the Lord is bringing us to an awakening. Yeah. I don't view this as God just kind of punishing his people. This is you've been sinning, so here comes the plague. Right. I don't think anything like that. I think the judgment's going to be very clear. We will all know when the judgment is here because Jesus will come back and we will all see him and we will all then be judged.
Yeah, it'd be unmistakable.
Yeah, there's not going to be any question about it whatsoever. And so
haven't heard a shofar blast anytime soon. So ram's horn as we no trumpets. Now if we start hearing that, we start hearing the warning sirens.
You start hearing a cosmic shofar, and then that might be indicative.
I don't know if this is
our redemption is coming.
I don't know if what I hear in my neighborhood is a shofar or a Dixie horn.
That
it does either way. Both of those indicate the end is near. But I would see I see this as really as a kind of an optimistic outlook that God is allowing the gospel to go forth. I mean, you look at technology;
Yes.
it's penetrating barriers and getting into living rooms that normally the gospel couldn't go.
Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing. I think I may be wrong on this, but even like law cracking down in China, if you will, on churches. I mean, the technology it's hard. You can't micromanage that, and so we have an opportunity as pastors not to just have this platform and have all these people view us. If we're viewing it that way, that's wrong. We actually have an opportunity to preach clearly what the gospel is, what Jesus has done.
Yep.
And it's very possible that our sermon, the preaching the word of God, could end up on the other side of the globe where we could never go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's really cool.
I think, I guess in one sense you can say, well, maybe in one way, yes, this is judgment. But that's true of every tragedy throughout history.
Right.
I think a better question is the Luke 13 question. Whenever somebody says, Jesus, those Galileans over there, those folks that the tower fell on, were they worse sinners than everybody else? And Jesus' response was, you're missing the point. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, you ought to be asking this question, why am I not dead? If I got what I deserved, God would have ended my life a long time ago. Except you repent, you too will likewise perish. So that's the place for that to start. Now, somebody did ask, I think, I saw this last week, if this event has affected my eschatology. And the answer is no, because my eschatology is not based on the events around me, but what I see, what I believe is sound exegesis of Scripture. Yeah. So is this the apocalypse? My answer would be no. Things like this have happened throughout history. I don't I don't endorse the idea of let's now go into the prophecy hunting mode. The prophecy, does this fit here? Does this fit here? Yeah. I don't think that is a profitable use of our time.
You don't see that really in the apostles either. When Paul's afflicted and suffering, and you're not seeing in the letters going, okay, is this it? You know that what they're looking at. I mean, there are times where they're teaching about the end times, of course, but it's more of, okay, here's affliction, here's suffering, and here's how we focus on Christ and the gospel amidst suffering.
Well, and I think we just have to keep in mind that eschatology works at two levels in terms of the end. The first is a personal level. Every one of us is going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ. And if we get to that place because the Lord comes back, or we get to that place because we die, we still do this. That is going to happen. There's eternity. There's such a thing as heaven and hell. There's such a thing as salvation and condemnation. There is an end time. And I will say this, as much as I endorse the eschatology I hold, I at the same time know that I could very well be wrong. And if the Lord comes back, I'm good with that. And you all are welcome to spend the next millennium saying, I told you so. Okay. I'll be a little disappointed if the pessimillennialists win, but I also suspect that when the Lord comes back, the overwhelming response on every Christian's part, besides joy at seeing Jesus, is going to be, oh, that's what you meant.
Yeah. Well, I think being a kind of the token amillennialist of the group, right? I think
it depends on my day. I might be an amillennial.
Yeah, you're having a pretty good day. So
Mondays I'm all millennial usually.
Right. Okay. But being the token amillennialist, I would just say let's be very disciplined with Scripture. Yes. And I think that was one of the things that one of my professors back in school hammered into us, is just discipline your imagination with Scripture.
Yes.
Do not let your imagination run wild. And just because you see something in the world and there's a word about something that's similar in Scripture does not at all mean that those are the same things. There's a very, very different context. And having a good hermeneutic, having an understanding of how to read the Bible correctly is very important for dismissing a lot of that. So we don't, throughout church history, we don't see, there's no enduring voices that saw like the Black Plague in the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, that those outbreaks that came back. There's no enduring voices that talk about, oh my gosh, this is the plague. All those guys were kind of like, that guy's kind of a crackpot, right? All those guys faded away from view, and what we see is quotes like Martin Luther has been circulating around. Some of the other guys have been circulating some really good quotes about having faith in the Lord and being confident in Him, and regardless of what happens, we're going to maintain our faithfulness and obedience to proclaim the gospel and to do what the church has always done. We also don't see any enduring voices from, say, like the Spanish flu in the early 20th century. We don't see any enduring voices that were taken seriously after that was done, because obviously that wasn't the apocalypse. So I'd say, if you're one of those guys that's spreading anything that's like, this is the apocalypse, this is the end times, I would say, just take some lessons from church history and discipline your mind with Scripture. And Revelation is a beautiful book filled with a lot of interesting things, but just be very careful when you read through it, when you hear about wars and famines and rumors of wars, what Jesus in Matthew 24 through 26, we start hearing, we need to be careful because the time is at hand, and yet not fearful and not frantic about it. We need to be confident in our eschatology and let that fuel our faithfulness, not our fear and disobedience.
Agreed.
So, and I kind of stole my own thunder on this, but why is it worth talking about the end times in this kind of a season? Is it a worthy conversation? Why did we bring this conversation up? Why is it useful and profitable to talk about eschatology right now?
I think it's important that we have to see, not just sitting here trying to map out how's this all going to go down, and when is it all going to go down, but looking at where are we going, where are we heading, what does the future have for us? And I think it's important for us to see, no matter where you land in your eschatology, that the world is broken. We stand on the very planet that the Lord spoke into existence so long ago. And if you travel the world, there are many beautiful places, beautiful mountains, streams, rivers, so on and so forth, but we're still seeing them through a broken lens. They're still not as beautiful as they should be,
Right.
or could be. And so viewing eschatology in this time helps us see, okay, the world is broken and God is going to do something about it.
Yep. Yeah.
So there's a future hope. I think what happens in talking about eschatology, people become fearful. They're dreading, being in the aircraft and their pilot gets taken away, and then all of a sudden they're like they're in a pilotless airplane. Like, what do we do? I'm left behind. We don't need to worry about that.
Right.
I think what the end is for us is hope. I mean, this is what you see Paul talking about. Lord Jesus, come, because we're longing for Jesus. We're longing for a new heaven, longing for a new earth, a place with no more tears, no more pain, no viruses. And that's why I think seeing eschatology in this time is good. We long for something that is beyond us.
Yeah.
If you don't have a healthy understanding that the afterlife is real and that there is a future, I think this does become doom and gloom. It's absolutely terrifying. You hear about extinction events and the end of civilization as we know it. And all of that for the Christian is, okay, we will see terrible things happen. There will always be wars and rumors of wars. There will always be earthquakes, famines, etc. Because a fallen world is just that way. We need to look to a future. The work of Christ is not merely individualistic salvation. It's not even entirely corporate salvation of humans. There is also in the atonement of Christ the redemption of creation.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I've realized, and we talked about this in various contexts over the years, but I think that's the kind of younger Reformed church plants, Acts 29 kinds of churches. We in the past have been anemic on our eschatology,
right.
And so and I think that's driven that's driven. If we were to be more robust in our eschatology, we would have a greater hope, and that empowers good counseling and empowers a lot of different other really cool ministries. So, yeah, definitely fun to talk through eschatology. So let's hit this last topic. I know we're running a little shorter on time. We've been going a little over an hour at this point. So let's hit favorite fiction, and then talk about some books for a few minutes. So what is your favorite fiction, whether it's books or movies, TV shows, whatever it is? What is your favorite fiction that you've enjoyed over the years? And let's just get a couple of minutes on that.
I love how you guys look at me. So there's, I am not the fiction guy, but I took up the challenge and.
Hand me my pistol.
Is this
Security?
Is it? We did not even see that coming.
I had no idea.
Okay.
I had no idea.
You know what?
It's been a minute since I've felt silly string.
It smells nasty.
Yeah, that's
bad.
That's a.
Okay.
Is that the virus?
No kidding. You didn't spray from 6 feet.
You're on.
Okay. So, actually, I asked a friend probably a month ago, who's big into fiction. I said, hey, I need you to help me figure out what to read. I need to get around, because all I've read really is just theology books, and help me expand the brain in this way. Because I'll watch fiction movies, and so I said, give me a fiction book that would help complement this time. And so he said, hey, definitely got to read 1984 by George Orwell. Mm-hmm. So I got the audiobook.
Well played.
I'm 2 hours into the 11-hour book, and it's actually it's really good.
Yeah, it's really good.
I really appreciate it. And so it's a dystopian novel, and I find it very complimentary to the time, in the sense of people are fearful, of course, in this fiction. Mm-hmm. But also there's a reality I've noticed just in fiction, whether it's books or movies, that fiction writers usually kind of go to one extreme, to a place that is either desired or feared, right? And I think that fits into our eschatology that, well, dystopia is a place that we don't ever want to be in.
Right.
But then even in the positive, where's a place we want to be in, that still doesn't compare. There's a longing of us wanting to be somewhere. So this book has been fun so far. Just kind of comparing.
It's a good one. Stay tuned. There's more to come on that one. It's good.
As far as fiction reading, I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. No apologies for that. I enjoy that immensely. I've loved the humor writer Patrick McManus. His little short stories have always been entertaining. In the realm of sci-fi, I enjoyed the Dune trilogy. Once I got past the trilogy, the rest of it began to be boring to me. As far as film, I love Tombstone.
Great one. Great movie.
In the realm of comedy, anything Mel Brooks did, I find entertaining.
Yes.
I think another one more recent, he didn't do this, but the movie What About Bob? Every pastor should watch that before he gets into the ministry. Yes. It'll prepare him for things he has no idea are coming, but are. So that's some of the fiction stuff.
Yeah, those are good. Yeah, What About Bob is a classic. We had to watch that for one of my psychology classes in college. It was very good. It's actually pretty decent. There's lots of weird things about it, but yeah. Anyway, so I've loved. I've always kind of gotten into fiction. I've read a lot of Tom Clancy books, and just over the years, those are just kind of fun. One of my favorites that whenever I get burned out on reading is Rainbow Six. It's a great, it's dated now. The technology in the book is completely outdated now, but at the time it was cutting edge, awesome, really, really cool book. I love Mark Twain. One of my favorites is Mark Twain's short stories. This stuff will make me laugh harder than anything else I've ever read or experienced. It is hysterical.
Didn't Mark Twain actually go to watch Spurgeon preach one time?
He did, yeah. There's a painting of it at the Spurgeon Library back in the day. So yeah,
he was not a fan.
He was not a fan. Yeah, I think Mark Twain is great to read. I don't know that I would necessarily have enjoyed having a cup of coffee with him, but I've also enjoyed Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities is one of my favorite books. I cut my teeth on literary devices. This was my textbook for my freshman English class in high school. Taught all kinds of stuff about literary motifs and all kinds of cool stuff. So I fell in love with Dickens back then. I've always enjoyed darker things, just like I love Ecclesiastes. I've always enjoyed darker fiction, not like weird, creepy stuff, but I mean like, say, for example, if I was a comic book guy, which I'm not, I would like Batman. I think those darker kind of tragic heroes are really compelling to me. I've enjoyed a lot of really cool just things along those lines. So what about, is fiction worth getting into? Is it something, I mean, obviously, we have, somebody who's dipping their toes in the water at this point and somebody who's pretty deeply immersed in it. Is fiction worth getting into? Is it a worthy pursuit for Christians, for pastors, just in general?
I would say yes. I think it helps give a picture of the human condition that you don't normally get. A more thoughtful one. It helps you engage, think about what people may actually be going through, the challenges, the struggles. Also, I think it helps, from a preaching standpoint, it can help see how somebody tells a story. And I think it can help with communication. That's my short answer.
Yeah, awesome.
And that's why I want to get more into fiction.
Yeah, I think I liked 1984. It was really good. I think my favorite of that genre is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. So it's we'll get into that one next. It's really good. So, why do you guys think that stories are compelling in that way? You talk about stories being kind of compelling and interesting. Why is that?
I think most folks are so much in the middle of their own story. They like to see something that is a complete, if you will. with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It can help them contextualize their own. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, while I'm not a huge fiction guy, I do like story, and I do I like finding the people who have the story and hearing the story told. I like being able to. I think I'm kind of getting out of the realm of just fiction, but just even hearing stories around our city of how certain buildings or how certain churches used to be. I'd love to know more about Boulevard in 1911, but to get a bigger picture and context of how things have come about, getting outside of myself, knowing that, hey, these things didn't happen in a vacuum.
Exactly. Awesome. So let's finish our conversation by talking about a little bit more about books. What's one book that you wish everyone in your church would read? And then we'll just kind of do a show and tell on books. So what's one book that you wish everyone in your church would read?
I'll go first. So we've been meeting once a month and reading books every month. So I thought I'd share what we read this last time, The Insanity of Obedience by Nick Ripken. I think it would be good, especially right now, to read because a lot of us are experiencing kind of the struggles with having to be the church and meet together. And this is no new thing for most believers around the world who are facing persecution or suffering or troubles of various kinds. And so this would just kind of help open our eyes to seeing the gospel and how God moves amidst troubling times and affliction.
I didn't bring a copy of it, failed to do that, but I wish every believer would read D. Martin Lloyd-Jones' book, Spiritual Depression, Its Causes and Cure. I think it would do so much to help with discipleship, comfort, and understanding themselves. A great series of sermons encapsulated now in a book of 31 chapters, maybe.
Yeah, it's pretty long, but
it's worth your time. It takes some effort, but it stays in my top 5 and has for over 40 years now, give or take.
Wow, that's even older than us.
Yeah, I'm not even 40. I wouldn't even a twinkle in my parents' eyes.
So I cheated and picked 2. So 2 my absolute favorites. This is Death by Love by Mark Driscoll and Gary Breshears. Really good application of the atonement to real life. It is hard. It is hard to read, and it's a gut-wrenching series of letters, and it's also heavy-hitting theology. But this is one of my favorite books because it pairs real life with real theology and gives you a really good understanding of the atonement of Christ and how it applies to people who've been sexually assaulted, people who are dealing with demonic issues, people who have abused others, people who've been abused themselves, people who are dealing with death. It's a really, really good book. Really hard, but really good. And then it's also, I don't know if it's maybe hard to get nowadays, but one of my other favorites, this is a classic, is Instruments in the Redeemer's Hands. It's kind of a basic primer on counseling, about how we as the body, as the church, counsel each other, care for each other, disciple each other. And if you've done any kind of the training or redemption groups or anything like that that we have put on, we take a lot of notes from Paul Tripp on that, his rhythm of love, no, speak, do, which is really, really cool. So, and we also had a request as well for books by women. So, Doug, you brought a handful of those.
I did. One that I've just gotten started, and I can't say for sure my opinion of it. I've read Amy Bird's material. Some like her, some don't. So I will cautiously say this little book, No Little Women, Equipping All Women in the Household of God, might be of some use. I have not read this, so I can't say of a certainty, but I've read Amy's stuff, blogs, and I've appreciated what she's done. Also, Rosaria Butterfield's Secret Thoughts of an Unlikely Convert is worth its weight in gold, as is Openness Unhindered, her follow-up book. Yep. Extraordinary stuff there.
She's got a really compelling story.
Powerful story. And especially if you're dealing with the issues of sexuality, sexual identity, I highly recommend that. Yeah. And then another one in those lines is a book by Nancy Pearcey, Love Thy Body. And the subtitle, Answering Hard Questions About Life and Sexuality. Absolutely brilliant. One of the best things I've ever read on the subject. She is, in essence, for the 21st century, I look at it as her taking Francis Schaeffer's commentary on culture, bringing it forward to our day, and applying it in our context. Worth its weight in gold. That's an excellent volume.
Very cool. Very cool. I brought one more. This is a counseling book, kind of a primer on biblical counseling as well, by Elise Fitzpatrick. It's called Counsel from the Cross. Very, very good. She's a solid thinker. She's also written a bunch of, I don't have them in front of me, but she's got a bunch of other kind of devotional style books. One is called Comforts from the Cross. She's got Comforts from Romans, and she's got another really good book called Idols of the Heart. All very good. Elise Fitzpatrick is her name. And then if you want a woman scholar who is outstanding, a lady named Karen Jobes is brilliant. Her First Peter commentary is the best. She's written several others, I think, on Esther and a couple others, several other books that she's written. Really and then Jen Wilkin for her Bible studies. Her that Women of the Word book is excellent. It's not. It's kind of. It's. I wouldn't say her title's wrong, but it's not necessarily for women. It's a book about hermeneutics and how to study the Bible. Jen Wilkin's stuff is solid. I've been tremendously blessed by a couple of conference messages that she's done, Q&As with pastors about how to do women's ministry. Really, over the last, 12 months or so, something like that, we've really revolutionized, she helped me revolutionize the way that I think about women's ministry, and has been really helpful for me as a pastor, thinking through how to minister to women and how to empower women to minister to women. And we've had some really awesome ladies step up in caring for our ladies at Redeemer. So we've made some big strides in that. I'm very proud of that. And I want to continue going through that. So so I hope that those books are encouraging to you. Thank you so much for being here with us. Any last comments, guys? Any last thoughts?
We probably need to set a time limit next time.
Time limit, okay.
We just got silly stringed.
Yeah,
we did.
We did.
I haven't had that happen to me in a long time.
It's been a while. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a fun conversation. I hope it's been a blessing to you. That you've learned some things and been challenged in a few things. Reach out to us at our emails. Reach out to us on Facebook. But yeah, we look forward to continuing the conversation. Hope you guys have a good day. Stay safe, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.